Have you ever stopped to think about the power of a plague that can destroy not only bodies, but also the soul of an entire civilization? Imagine for a moment the unbearable pain of open wounds all over your body, the feeling that your very body is turning against you. In ancient Egypt, something like this happened, and it was one of the most devastating plagues God sent as a punishment for Pharaoh's stubbornness. But what is the real meaning of this plague of inflamed wounds? What did it represent, not only for the Egyptians, but also for the spiritual understanding we can have of it today? Let's understand that now. Why was the sixth plague, with its painful and inflamed wounds, one of the most intense of all the plagues sent to Egypt? What does it reveal about the spiritual power of justice and divine punishment? And more importantly, what can we learn from it for our own lives, especially when we are in a battle against something that seems unbeatable? The sixth plague, as recorded in the book of Exodus, was a physical and psychological blow to Egypt, which had already been facing the consequences of the previous 5 plagues. When Moses and Aaron presented themselves before Pharaoh, following God's command, they took ashes from the furnace and threw them into the air, as instructed by God. From this action, boils appeared, festering sores that spread quickly all over the Egyptians' bodies, affecting even their animals. Imagine the panic and pain. The plague spared no one. Even Pharaoh's magicians, who had tried to use their enchantments, could not relieve the pain or heal the wounds. These wounds were not only physical, but also had a deep meaning in the spiritual context. They represented the impurity that Egypt carried, and the act of throwing the ashes into the air was a symbol that this impurity was being exposed and spread, making it impossible to ignore. But what was the real reason God chose this kind of plague? Wouldn't a more immediate and severe punishment, like the death of the firstborns or the destruction of crops, have been more effective? Why this plague of inflamed wounds? The spiritual meaning is closely tied to the concept of purification. The sores that appeared, open and festering, were like a metaphor for the spiritual state of the Egyptians, a people who were hardened, resistant to change and freedom. When we refuse to learn from the signs and open ourselves to change, our internal wounds become external, visible, and impossible to ignore. They not only affect the body, but also impact our soul, mind, and relationships. This plague also stands out because of something very peculiar, the inability of Pharaoh's magicians to heal the wounds. Throughout the other plagues, the magicians could somehow imitate or attempt to reverse what was happening. However, in the sixth plague, God's power was so great and irreversible that there was no space left for falsehoods or deceptions. Only divine intervention could resolve the situation, something Pharaoh in his arrogance could not understand. Now, when we think about our modern world, we can find a parallel. Sometimes in our lives, we ignore the signs that something is wrong. Emotional pain, health problems, conflicts in our relationships, all of these can be signs of internal wounds that have not been addressed. Just like Egypt, we can reflect a resistance to change and healing. We don't have to wait for the wounds to become uncontrollable. We can choose now to look within and seek healing before the plagues spread even further. But how does the story of the sixth plague connect with our lives today? How can we avoid letting spiritual and emotional wounds spread, destroying what we hold most dear? And does this plague have something to teach us about true inner transformation that we all need? The answer may be simpler than we think. When wounds appear, they can be the reflection of an accumulation of pain and resistance. Perhaps, like the Egyptians, we are avoiding dealing with deep issues that need healing. These wounds represent the need for us to free ourselves from our own limitations and pride, to learn to heal rather than hide what we truly need to transform. In our lives, there is no more room for denial. because wounds always appear when the body, soul, or mind needs attention. As the festering sores spread throughout Egypt, the people were being forced to confront an inescapable truth. Without repentance, without genuine transformation, suffering would be endless. It was a spiritual battle unfolding as Pharaoh refused to yield. But this is where the true lesson begins. Inner change, the purification of the soul, only happens when we are willing to open ourselves to the truth, even when it is painful. The body may be healed, but the soul only heals when we admit our failures and make the decision to change. The sixth plague of inflamed wounds was not just about punishment. It was about giving Egypt and ourselves the opportunity to be reborn in a new and better way, an invitation to finally let go of everything that keeps us from living fully and freely. Are you ready for that transformation? Are you willing to face your own internal wounds and allow healing to come from within? If this reflection has touched you, and if you want to understand more deeply what the plagues of Egypt have to teach us about ourselves, subscribe to the channel to follow the upcoming videos. Let's discover together the lessons that spirituality has to offer in every situation we face.